The new student timidly walked up to the podium, took the chalk from the teacher's hand, and wrote 3 X's on the blackboard to represent her name. The classroom erupted into laughter. The relentless teasing from the students continued until the end of the school day. They surrounded the girl, constantly mocking her as a fool.
Hey, don't go on, read one word, read something.
Liesel was an abandoned girl who had never been to school. She couldn't read or write. Her first book was picked up at her brother's meager funeral. On the train to her foster family in a small town outside Munich, Germany, Liesel's 6-year-old brother died. They hastily got off the train and, with the help of a gravedigger, buried her already cold brother in a hastily dug hole by the railway tracks. Liesel watched in a daze until a black-covered book clattered to the ground from the gravedigger's arms, awakening the girl. She quickly picked up the little black book from the snow-covered grave and clutched it tightly as she left. From then on, this book became Liesel's spiritual solace, accompanying her through every difficult night after arriving at her foster home. After getting into a fight at school and returning home, Liesel inevitably faced her foster mother's nagging. It was her second day in this house, and she didn't truly understand her foster mother, Rosa, yet, only remembering her sharp-tongued appearance when they first met. Liesel dared not confront Rosa directly. After dinner, she quickly retreated to the attic room, holding her book tightly and silently missing her mother and brother.
I have just come to say goodnight.
What is this?
Why would a nice girl like you want to read such a thing?
It wasn't always mine. It belonged to my brother.
Kind-hearted Hans saw through the girl's feigned toughness but chose not to expose it. Instead, he awkwardly began to read the book to her. It turned out to be a gravedigger's handbook, teaching gravediggers how to bury the dead and how to treat corpses with proper respect. This also became Liesel's first reading lesson. Gradually, under her foster father's patient guidance, Liesel was able to read some sentences, though still with difficulty. But Hans wasn't a great student himself, so he took the girl to a wall in the basement that had already been divided into sections with white paint. Liesel could write words she didn't know or new words she learned on it, turning the wall into a dictionary, writing as much as she wanted. In this way, the basement became the girl's favorite secret hideout, where she would spend her free time reading and studying. She fell in love with reading, and the power of words and the desire to express herself through writing took root in her small body, growing into a towering tree. As time passed, Liesel thought less and less about her mother who had abandoned her and her deceased brother, and she grew more accustomed to life on Heaven Street.
Liesel!
Come on, Liesel, we'll miss the parade.
Right. Come on, let's go.
There was an important gathering tonight, with every household holding torches and gathering in the town square. The children, unaware of the reason, were even more excited, staring intently at the mayor's passionate speech. Liesel was no exception. However, as the torches ignited the pile of wood in the center of the square, the sudden leap of the flames illuminated the faces of everyone present, an image more terrifying than the gaping maw of a beast. The roaring fire, the swirling papers in the heat, the books turning to ash bit by bit, and the faces of the people, either numb or shocked, formed the main theme of the night. More and more people threw books into the fire to show their loyalty. Liesel felt her heart bleeding. Soon, a book was also thrust into her hands, demanding that she express her loyalty through action. Under the terrifying shadow of totalitarianism, the girl had no choice. She had to go along with the crowd to protect herself. But silence did not mean submission. When the frenzied crowd dispersed, Liesel slowly walked towards the pile of smoldering flames and quickly picked up a book from the mountain of ashes, pressing it tightly to her chest. The girl thought she had done it secretly, but she didn't know that a pair of eyes, twinkling like stars in the darkness, had witnessed the whole process. It was the mayor's wife, who remembered the girl who stole the book.
What is it? Are you sick? You stole it.
The smoke from the girl's clothes made her cough uncontrollably, and her secret was discovered by her foster father. Fortunately, Hans did not pursue Liesel's book-stealing behavior but chose to keep the secret with her, with the only condition that she could only read the book in the basement. War and extreme ruling ideologies had turned everyone into monsters, with the most affected being the passionate young people. They were full of fervor and longing for war. unaware that what they thought was charging at the enemy was actually rushing towards death. But even more terrifying than spiritual poverty was the material scarcity. Life for ordinary people on Heaven Street became increasingly difficult. Hans's job as a painter could no longer support the family of 3. As a result, Rosa had to take on more laundry work, and Liesel did her best to assist her foster mother with some auxiliary tasks. One day, the girl received a delivery job. She needed to take the clothes washed by Rosa to a designated location, carefully count them, and bring back the full payment. With a friend's escort, Liesel walked through the long streets and turned into an extremely luxurious garden before finally arriving at her destination, the mayor's house. The mayor's wife recognized the girl at first glance.
So you like books? Come.
Like a sailor enchanted by the siren's beautiful song, Liesel was bewitched and walked into the house unconsciously. The moment she looked around, the girl felt like she had arrived in heaven. She had never seen so many books. Liesel's fingers lovingly traced the tightly packed books, stopping at one of them and looking expectantly at the woman. With the mayor's wife's tacit approval, the girl excitedly took out the book and became completely absorbed in it, losing track of time. It wasn't until her friend's anxious call came from outside that Liesel snapped back to reality. From then on, delivering clothes and reading books became a secret shared between the girl and the mayor's wife. The walls of the basement were left with more and more traces of her growth. In the fragmented moments of time, Liesel read voraciously, always keeping a sincere soul, waiting for the light to come. However, fate always brings trials and tribulations to those who strive upward. A mysterious knock on the door in the middle of the night shattered the family's peace. Hans and Rosa's faces were full of panic, but their actions did not stop until they helped him to the attic bed, closed all the curtains, and finally let out a sigh of relief.
Who is he, Papa?
His father gave up his life for me. Now I need you to promise me that you will not tell anyone about our visit.
Yeah.
As her foster father narrated, Liesel began to understand the story behind the accordion, the legendary military career, the life-saving benefactor, the persecuted identity, and the danger of harboring this person. But they had no choice. They could only try to live as normally as possible. For Liesel, the only change was probably an additional mysterious interactive ritual that only their family understood before going to school every day. She continued her daily routine, going to school, delivering the washed clothes, and hiding in the study with the mayor's wife to read books. Max also gradually regained his vitality under their careful care. However, his identity was too sensitive. He had to stay in bed and couldn't move around. It would be troublesome if someone discovered him. So Liesel went to the mayor's house more frequently to read books and then came back to tell Max, accompanying him through the tough times, until the day the mayor returned home unexpectedly and discovered their secret. Liesel was ruthlessly driven away. Rosa lost a high-quality customer, and the family gained an extra mouth to feed, making life even more difficult. From then on, they reduced their meals from 3 a day to 2. What's worse, Max, who had been lying in bed for too long, was almost getting bedsores. He had to get up and walk around. But people would see him, and Rosa rejected the idea without hesitation, opting to move him to the basement instead. In this way, Liesel's secret base gained a new occupant.
Can you describe the day for me?
It's cloudy.
No. Make the words yours. If your eyes could speak.
Under Max's guidance, Liesel gradually learned to describe the weather. Language and words further expanded the boundaries of the girl's life, laying the foundation for her writing. Her barren soul began to sprout branches and leaves. Christmas arrived, with a blanket of white snow covering the earth. Max sat at the basement table, diligently painting books white. Hans, on the steps closest to the basement, played the accordion with rapt attention, hoping that the music would bring hope and warmth to the young man. Liesel also quietly transported secret props to the basement, wanting to prepare a secret surprise for everyone. The girl's furtive figure caught Hans's attention. He immediately followed the trail of fallen snowflakes and found Liesel and Max sitting on the basement floor, playing with snow. Without hesitation, he joined in. He and Liesel worked together, transporting more snow into the basement, and then, fully armed, they played a snowball fight in the cramped space.
What are you so doing down here?
Rosa!
The bad woman on the battlefield. Time!
Rosa also joined the fray, and instantly, laughter and joy drove away the gloom brought by the war. Max couldn't help but marvel that this was the best Christmas he had spent in the 2 years he had been living in the basement. Then, he handed the girl a carefully wrapped gift, grateful for her companionship over the long months. Liesel tore open the wrapping to find the book she had always been curious about. However, the title page had been cleared, turning it into a brand new notebook.
Words are life, Liesel. All those blank pages, they're for you to fill.
He hoped that this girl, who loved reading so much, would try her hand at writing and use her shining soul to illuminate more people wandering alone in the dark. On the snowy night, everyone went to sleep with high hopes for tomorrow. But someone fell ill. The melting snowman took away most of Max's body heat, causing him to have a high fever and his life to hang by a thread. Rosa was both angry and helpless. They had no money for medicine and could only wait for fate to decide. Watching the man sweating profusely, Liesel was filled with deep self-reproach and guilt. It was her idea to build a snowman. It was all her fault. Suddenly, she remembered what Max had told her last night. Words are life. So she began to read to him, attempting to awaken the man's will to live with words. But she only had 2 books, which she quickly finished reading. What else could she do? Liesel racked her brain and finally came up with a not-so-good idea, to steal some books from the mayor's house. God seemed to favor this girl as well. The study window of the mayor's house was actually open, making the originally difficult book-stealing plan suddenly much simpler. However, as soon as her hand touched the bookshelf, she heard footsteps approaching. The mayor was about to come in. Liesel was terrified and quickly hid behind the curtain, her heart pounding and even breathing becoming difficult. Fortunately, she was not discovered. In this way, Liesel began the strange cycle of stealing books, reading books, and stealing books again. Among the 14 books she owned, more than 6 were stolen from the mayor's study. Gradually, Max stopped sweating and talking nonsense, but he still did not wake up. One day, while Liesel was playing soccer with her friends, a military truck suddenly stopped in front of their house and began to search the basements door to door. The girl was terrified. She had to find a way to notify her mother to move Max.
I have to go inside.
Oh, great.
At the cost of a bruised knee, Liesel found a legitimate reason to go home. Her foster parents, having received the news, immediately began to transfer the still unconscious man in the basement. Finally, they managed to hide Max, who had a sensitive identity, just 1 minute before the soldiers entered the house and successfully escaped disaster. A few days later, Liesel's foster mother suddenly burst into the classroom where Liesel was having class, scolding and pulling her by the ear, dragging her to the school corridor. After making sure no one was around, she quickly put on a smiling face and excitedly shared the good news with the girl.
I'm sorry if I hurt you. I couldn't think of any other way to tell you. He woke up. He's going to live.
Mama.
Under the terrifying political atmosphere, Rosa could only use this clumsy method to pass on secrets in a way that seemed reasonable. For the rest of the time, Liesel struggled to suppress the corners of her mouth from turning up uncontrollably and tried hard to look sad. Finally, when school was over, she ran home as fast as she could, burst into the basement, and hugged Max tightly. It turned out that Max really could hear her voice while he was unconscious. Those words seemed to have wings, flying into his mind and constantly telling him that although reality was cruel, someone was waiting for him to wake up. This warm moment didn't last long. The air raid sirens sounded, and the people of Heaven Street rushed out of their homes to take shelter in the nearby air raid shelters. Max, however, took this opportunity to bravely step out of the basement, standing on the deserted street and looking up at the starry sky. The long-awaited freedom and fresh air almost brought him to tears. With the increasingly tense situation, Max realized that he had to leave, otherwise he would be a burden to the Hans family. So, on another dark night, he bid farewell to the family he had lived with for over 2 years and set off on an unknown journey, with the girl's reluctant gaze following him. However, leaving was like a domino effect, toppling everything in its path. Old Hans also received a conscription letter.
Papa, come home.
Good girl.
With the girl's reluctant and worried gaze, the train carried a group of soldiers who were unwilling to leave home, heading towards the uncertain front lines. They might never see each other again in this life. Rosa hugged the accordion left by her husband and wailed, her suppressed emotions hanging over Heaven Street. There were no more carefree children playing soccer on the street. Watching her mother's restless appearance even in her sleep, Liesel was dazed, recalling their first meeting when the nagging and fierce Rosa seemed so full of vitality. In just a few short years, the war had shattered them into such fragile beings. It seemed like Liesel had suddenly grown up. After the air raid siren sounded again, she could already stay by her mother's side like an adult and accompany her through the difficult nights. The explosions grew denser and denser, and the sparks from the explosions illuminated the air raid shelter. Liesel's gaze swept over the terrified faces, and she decided to do something.
There once was a ghost of a boy.
What was that?
She's telling a story.
As if by magic, Liesel's voice pierced through the layers of fear brought by the war and soothed every panicked soul in the air raid shelter. Gradually, they quieted down, enraptured by the charm of the story. Liesel once again clearly felt the profound meaning of what Max had said: words are life. Words could nourish the barren souls under the war's gloom. On the same night, Hans was also in the midst of chaos. The war had escalated, and the soldiers who had just gotten off the train were hastily driven to the front line. Old Hans was ostracized by the younger soldiers and pushed to the back seat. A few minutes later, an explosion occurred. Hans was the only one who survived on the bus. Because he was injured, he lost his combat effectiveness and was sent back to Heaven Street. As Liesel emerged from the air raid shelter, she saw her father safely returning home from afar. She ran up excitedly and hugged Hans tightly, unwilling to let go. The family was finally reunited again. Hans played the accordion once more, and the melodious music floated out of the window, bringing hope of reunion to a neighbor who was eagerly waiting for their loved ones to return safely. Liesel sat at the basement table, solemnly opening the blank notebook that Max had given her, deciding to start writing. She wanted to use words to build a wall, isolating the reality of gunfire and suffering, and bringing hope and comfort to more people in misfortune. Papa's accordion playing, Mama's fierce delivery of her brother's photo, Max looking up at the starry sky, Rudy diving into the water to retrieve her notebook, the handful of snow she pulled out of her pocket. All these golden moments were Liesel's material. She wrote furiously, forgetting time, as if determined to capture every beautiful moment she had stumbled upon in this chaotic world. Unbeknownst to her, fate had brought them together again only to make it easier for death to take them all away at once. The air raid came again, this time without any warning. War was like a robber and a thief, taking everything from the little town. Liesel was the only one who survived on Heaven Street. She stumbled forward, her eyes scanning the crowd, only to see her foster parents lying motionless on the ground. She slowly walked over and sat down between them, letting out a muffled sob. Her tears seemed to forget to flow, as if she was on the brink of collapse. Everything was gone. What could little Liesel possibly rely on to carry her through the remaining desolate years of her life? At that moment, the rescue soldiers carried someone else out. It was Rudy, her best friend who would do anything for her. Liesel rushed over and clutched his hand tightly.
Liesel. Shh. I love... Rudy, nein! Rudy, wake up!
Rudy was also dead. Liesel couldn't believe it. She buried her head deeply into Rudy's chest. She tried to lift his lifeless body, futilely trying to keep him from falling. But she couldn't hold him. She had to lay him back down on the ravaged earth. Looking at the boy's lifeless face, she slowly bent down and gently kissed Rudy Steiner's lips. It was a kiss she had owed him for a long time. Liesel and Rudy first met on the day Liesel arrived at Heaven Street. At that time, she had just lost her mother and brother, and was about to face unfamiliar foster parents and an uncertain future. As a result, she had closed herself off, refusing to communicate with anyone. She hesitated to get out of the car until her foster father smiled and reached out his hand. Only then did Liesel take the first step toward her new life. Not far away, Rudy, who was playing soccer with his friends, stared at the girl's retreating figure and grinned foolishly. That was Liesel's first impression of Rudy. The next morning, the boy showed up at Liesel's door, claiming he was taking her to school.
Hurry up, Liesel!
You like to run?
I bet I could beat you.
This boy, with his hair always as bright yellow as a lemon, dreamed of becoming the fastest runner in the world. To that end, he often painted himself black and ran around the playground like Jesse Owens. But Rudy didn't understand why the school's security guard would always catch him and drag him home by the ear, ordering his father to clean him up. His father would always sigh while wiping him down, as if he had done something terribly wrong.
Son, you can't go around painting yourself black.
Why not?
Because you shouldn't want to be black people.
Why?
He really couldn't understand why adults always had so many rules and taboos. Along the way, the boy chattered on about his troubles. The girl, however, didn't respond at all, silently following him toward the school. To Liesel's surprise, the boy caught up with her after school and continued to chat about funny things that happened at school. In order to make her speak, Rudy even suggested a running race. If he reached the end of the path first, Liesel would have to give him a kiss. As for why he wanted her kiss, the innocent boy wasn't quite sure. In this way, their friendship quickly grew stronger with each race they ran. They even developed a secret code just for the two of them.
1 spit yes, 2 spits no. I knew it.
When they had secrets they couldn't easily talk about, they would use spitting to convey their opinions or attitudes. One day, while Liesel was sneaking into the mayor's study to steal a book, Rudy discovered her and found a blank book she had dropped. It was inscribed with 4 Liesel, from Max. Rudy sensed that Liesel was hiding something from him and kept asking who Max was. Instead of answering directly, Liesel grabbed the book and ran away. In the end, under Rudy's relentless questioning, Liesel used their spitting code to reveal the secret she had been trying to keep from him. There was a person with a sensitive identity hiding in their basement. Unfortunately, this scene was witnessed by their school rival. He suspected that the book in Liesel's hands was a banned book that should have been destroyed and tried to snatch it to report them. Rudy knew that if the secret of Liesel's basement was exposed, it would be disastrous. So, he had no choice but to throw the book away. The frustrated boy pushed Rudy to the ground in anger. After he left, Rudy, ignoring the pain in his body, immediately jumped into the cold river to chase the book that Liesel cherished so much. Rudy Steiner would do anything for his best friend, Liesel. After this incident, their friendship became even stronger, but Liesel still hadn't given him that kiss she owed him. As the war intensified, more and more innocent civilians were forced into battle. Rudy's father was also on the list of recruits. On the morning he left, he hugged his children goodbye with a deliberately relaxed smile. Rudy stood by, watching silently. And for the first time, he truly felt the reality of war. War meant never-ending hunger and the bitter taste of losing loved ones. He began to hate war and despise the fascists who started it. However, this boy who hated war was identified by the fascists as a potential elite for their next generation because of his running talent. During a school track meet, the fastest runner caught the attention of the authorities and was recorded. A while later, Rudy received an admission notice from an elite school. He was supposed to start training this summer. This was a terrifying thing. The boy hugged his mother tightly, unsure of what to do. In the end, he thought of running away. Rudy put on the suit his father had prepared for his birthday, took his only possession, a soccer ball that he rarely let go of, and quietly called Liesel to run away with him. He didn't want to die before he grew up. He wanted to go to a place where no one could find him and start a new life. However, both Liesel and Rudy knew deep down that they had nowhere to go. After shouting and venting by the lake, they obediently went back home. But change always comes faster than plans. Before Rudy could wait for the summer training to start, the air raid happened. Everyone on Heaven Street was taken by death in their sleep, except for Liesel, who was writing in the basement. She finally gave Rudy the kiss she had owed him for so long. His lips tasted of dust and sweetness, like the regret in the shade of a tree, like the regret under the spotlight of a troublemaker. Liesel kissed him gently for a long time. On the ruined Heaven Street, their teeth clacked together. After staying by Rudy's side for a few minutes, Liesel forced herself to stand up and stumbled forward, coughing and searching. In the end, she found a book in her foster father's accordion in the rubble. The bellows were empty, with no air going in or out.